So here's a question I get asked a lot. Bobby, how did you become a physician, scientist, Ironman, triathlete, podcaster, an exotic animal ranch, and bed and breakfast owner? And honestly, the answer is I didn't plan most of it, which might be good news if you don't have your life figured out yet either. I certainly didn't for parts of mine. Hi, I'm Dr. Bobby Du Bois, and welcome to Live Long and Well, a podcast where we will talk about what you can do to live as long as possible and with as much energy and vigor that you wish. Together, we will explore what practical and evidence-supported steps you can take. Come join me on this very important journey, and I hope that you feel empowered along the way. I'm a physician, Ironman triathlete, and have published several hundred scientific studies. I'm honored to be your guide. Welcome, my dear listeners, to episode number 60. From point A to point B, how I built a life I never planned. Well, today I'm going to do something I don't usually do. Talk about myself, not because I think my life story is particularly fascinating, but because over the past few months I've had enough people ask, how did you get here? That I figured maybe there's some lessons worth sharing. This isn't a victory lap. I'm not going to list my credentials or tell you how great I am. What I want to do is share 5 lessons, 5 patterns I noticed looking back at the decisions that shaped my life. Some of these lessons I figured out intentionally. Others I stumbled onto accidentally. Here's the framework. Sometimes you need a clear long-term goal, like when I decided to become a physician. But sometimes you just need to figure out the next best step, like when we bought a piece of land in Texas with absolutely no idea what we'd do with it. The important theme for me in both approaches, knowing what you're good at, and just as importantly, knowing what you're not good at. So let's dive in. Lesson number 1, ask for advice, but trust yourself. Lesson number 1 came early. I was in college trying to figure out my future, and I was torn between 2 paths, medicine and business. I loved science. I loved the idea of helping people, but I was also entrepreneurial and wanted to know how businesses work, how decisions get made, how systems function. As I said, I was torn. So I did what you're supposed to do. I asked for advice. I talked to my father, who was a physician, and someone I deeply respected. And he gave me very clear guidance. He said, Bobby, you have to choose. You can't do both medicine and business. Pick one. So I picked medicine. Turns out he was completely wrong. Medicine is a business, or certainly became one. Understanding both the clinical side and the business side didn't just become useful in my career, it was essential. I spent decades working at the intersection of clinical care and healthcare economics. I helped found a few companies in the healthcare space that brought together my passions and skills. These companies combine the scientific rigor of what does and does not work with a business framework that helped groups achieve the optimal win-win-win. Do right by the patient, the doctor, and those paying for care. You can't build companies like that if you only understand medicine, and you can't build them if you only understand business. Now, my father gave me the best advice he could with the information he had, but he didn't know what my career would look like. He couldn't have known. So here's the lesson. Seek counsel from people you respect. listen to them, consider their perspective. But in the end, trust yourself. Your gut has data they don't have access to. Only you know what feels right. So for you, my listeners, pause for a moment and think about this. Is there a decision you're facing right now where you're getting conflicting advice or where the advice just doesn't feel quite right? What's your gut telling you? Write it down. You don't have to act on it today, but acknowledge what your instinct is saying. All right, lesson 2, figure out your superpower and your kryptonite. Trusting myself led me into medicine, but once I was there, I had to figure out what kind of physician I wanted to be. And that brings me to lesson number 2. Figure out your superpower. And just as importantly, figure out your kryptonite. So I'm working as a physician and I realize something. I enjoy taking care of individual patients. I really do. But what absolutely fascinates me is the big picture. How do we provide care to populations? How do we encourage care that is based upon credible evidence? And how do we balance cost, quality, and access? Since I had no idea how to answer these types of questions, I decided to get a PhD. And that's when I start to figure out what I'm actually good at. Now, the traditional path for a PhD is you spend years doing research, and then you write this massive dissertation, hundreds of pages. Then later, you extract papers from it for publication, which gets you academic credibility. I looked at the process and thought, why? Why not skip the dissertation entirely and go straight to the deliverables that actually matters? Peer-reviewed, published papers. So that's what I did. I pioneered an approach where my dissertation requirement was just 3 published papers in peer-reviewed journals. Done. Now, this wasn't arrogance. This was me recognizing my superpower. Getting stuff done by figuring out the fastest way to go from point A to point B. Or in this case, getting the PhD done in 2 years versus 5, and getting the research results out there quickly. It turned out that I'm good at cutting through unnecessary steps or finding the most efficient way to go from point A to point B. But I also discovered something else. I'm good at synthesis, taking complex information, whether it's scientific research, health economics, or business principles, and translating it into language that non-experts can understand. That became my niche. I became, in essence, a translator, explaining scientific issues to business people, explaining business principles to clinicians, synthesizing research about who needs what treatment, how data can inform those decisions, how we value different interventions. But here's the thing, and this is just as important. I also learned what I'm not good at: people management. I see strategic opportunities, but I'm not a great people manager. I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the emotional intelligence for it. And you know what? That turns out to be okay. It took a decade for me to realize that I really couldn't be good at everything. The solution isn't to beat yourself up about your weaknesses. The solution is to surround yourself with people who have those complementary strengths. So that's what I did. Throughout my career, I've made sure to work with people who are great at managing teams, building relationships, and navigating office politics. Our companies did well because I swim in my swim lane and others could do what they do best in their swim lanes. Together, we were a really powerful team. And this pattern shows up everywhere in my life. At the ranch, I'm all about function, getting things built, making systems work. But beauty, color choices, interior design, that is not my forte. My beautiful wife, Gail, is our chief beauty officer. She's the one who makes Madrone Springs Ranch not just functional, but stunning. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at, and I build my team accordingly. For this lesson, here's what I want you to do. Take out a piece of paper or open a note on your phone and make 2 columns. Left column, what I'm actually good at. Not what you wish you were good at. What do you actually do well? Right column, what am I not good at? Be honest. Then ask yourself, who in my life has strengths that complement my weaknesses? And if the answer is nobody, maybe it's time to find those people. On to lesson 3. Start with the big picture, then find the incremental steps. Knowing my professional strengths helped me build a career, but I also needed to think long-term about my physical self. Which brings me to lesson 3. Start with the big picture, then work backwards with incremental steps. I'm in my 20s and I start noticing something about men in their 40s and 50s. I look at them and ask myself, what is it about their physique that makes them look old? And I identified 2 things, a large belly and small arms. Perhaps simplistic, but heck, I was in my 20s. Now, I could have just accepted that as inevitable. That's what happens when you get old. But instead, I thought, what if it doesn't have to be that way? So I started a daily regimen. Every single day, I worked on both areas of my body, core exercises, arm exercises. The goal wasn't to look like a bodybuilder. The goal was to not look the way I feared looking. That's big picture thinking. I envisioned what I wanted, or more accurately, what I didn't want. And I built backwards from there with small daily steps. Of course, as I've discussed, my understanding of a full exercise program is a lot more, but it was my start. Fast forward to my late 30s. I'm thinking about marathons, and I realize if I'm ever going to do this, I need to start now. Not someday, now. So I start running. I build up gradually, and eventually I run my first marathon. Then in my 50s, I added cycling. And then I think, well, if I add one more sport, swimming, I could do a triathlon. So I do. I start with short distance events, sprint triathlons, then Olympic distance, then half Ironman, and eventually full Ironman distance. I've now completed 4 full Ironmans and 15 Ironman 70.3 races. At 69 years old, I'm still competing. But here's the key. I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be an Ironman. I said, I don't want to look old. Then I said, I should run a marathon while I still can. Then I said, I wonder if I could add cycling, then swimming. One incremental step at a time, guided by a big picture vision. And you know what? That process never stops, because now at 69, I'm asking myself, what's the next step for me? I still enjoy training and doing Ironman races, but I'm getting slower and slower, and it's getting harder. That's just reality. So instead of full Ironman distance, I'm mostly doing the half Ironman distance now. And let me tell you, 7.5 hours is plenty of a challenge for me. But I've had to accept something. Being fast is not going to happen. Not getting injured so that I can get to the start line is my primary goal. Reaching the finish line is my second goal. Not doing the race competitively, just finishing. And that's okay. And I'm thinking about the ranch. I want to maintain an active life there. What strength exercises do I need so I can lift 50-pound bags of feed for the animals? What training do I need so I can walk uneven trails without falling? So I've added more strength training to my life. Not generic gym exercises, functional strength training focused on actual day-to-day activities. The things I need to do. It's the same lesson, just applied differently. Big picture, I want to live actively on this ranch for as long as possible. Incremental steps, specific exercises that support that vision. Always asking, what's the next best step for me? So, for this lesson, my dear listeners, think about something you want for your future. Maybe it's physical, like me in my 20s. Maybe it's professional. Maybe it's relational. Picture yourself 10 or 20 years from now. What do you want to be true? What do you not want to be true? Now work backwards. What's one small thing you could do this week that moves you in that direction? Not a huge commitment, just one small step. And then do it. But you know what? That's not always how life works. Which brings us to lesson 4. When you don't have a vision, just take the next best step. This lesson is almost the opposite of lesson 3. Sometimes you do have a long-term vision, but sometimes you have absolutely no idea where you're going, and that's okay. Let me tell you about Madrone Springs Ranch. We moved to Texas, and at some point we decided, let's buy some land. Maybe it could be a weekend getaway. We found this beautiful, undeveloped property. We bought it, then we built a weekend home, and that was the plan. Weekend getaway, that's it. Then COVID hit. We decided to quarantine at the ranch. We sold our house in Austin. We thought, okay, we're here full time now. Let's build it out a little bit more. We built the lodge. Then we created trails over the property. Then we thought, you know what would be cool? Exotic animals. So we bought exotic animals. We now have kangaroos, alpacas, black buck antelope, fallow deer, axis deer, gemsbok ibex, and addax antelope. And at some point, we looked around at this incredible paradise we built, and we thought, we should share this with other people. So Madrone Springs Ranch, we turned it into a bed and breakfast. If you want to see what it looks like, the ranch website has lots of fun pictures and videos. Now, here's the thing. I did not have a 10-year plan that said, step 1, buy land. Step 2, build a ranch. Step 3, acquire exotic animals. Step 4, open a bed and breakfast. That's not what happened. What happened was we took one step. Then we saw the next step. Then we took that step. Then we saw the next one. Not everything requires a master plan. Sometimes the path reveals itself one decision at a time. It did for me. Be open to where yes leads you. Some of life's best outcomes come from curiosity, not calculation. So here's the listener challenge for this lesson. Is there something you've been saying someday about? Not a massive life change, just something interesting you've been curious about but haven't acted on because you don't know where it will lead? This week, take one small step towards it. Not the whole journey, just the first step. See where it takes you. You don't need to know the destination to start walking. Lesson 5, know what you're good at, then build around it. But there was one area of my life where I combined both approaches, where I had a long-term vision and took incremental steps. And that's this podcast. Let me tell you why I started Live Long and Well. My entire career has focused on evidence. What does the research actually say about different medical treatments? Which ones work? Which ones don't? How do we make decisions based on data, not hype? And every week, every single week, I would hear stories about ways to live longer, ways to be healthier, ways to optimize your body. And so much of it was just hype, no rigorous evidence to support it. And I'd listen to podcasters in the wellness space who were promoting treatments, supplements, interventions that simply aren't backed by solid research. And I thought, I could do this differently. I feel that I have a unique combination of skills. I can synthesize complex research. I can explain it in a way that non-scientists can understand. I can do it succinctly and compellingly, and I have no financial conflicts of interest, no sponsors, no products to sell. So I decided to bring it all together in one effort, this podcast. Now, am I the best researcher in the world? No. Am I the fastest Ironman? Definitely not. Am I the most charismatic podcast host? I'll let you be the judge of that. But here's what I can do. I can translate rigorous evidence into accessible stories without an agenda. That's my lane. That's what I'm good at. And this podcast is the perfect example of lesson 5. Know what you're good at, then build your life around it. This is exactly what I did with those healthcare companies I mentioned earlier. I brought together scientific rigor with business frameworks. I translated between worlds, helping doctors understand economics, helping business people understand clinical evidence, helping everyone work towards that win-win-win. I didn't try to become someone I wasn't. I leveraged what I was already good at. So listeners, here's the big one. Think about your current work, whether that's your job, your side project, your volunteer work, whatever. Are you spending most of your time doing what you're actually good at? Or are you spending most of your time trying to fix your weaknesses? Because here's the truth. You'll get way further by doubling down on your strengths and partnering with people who complement your weaknesses. So identify one thing you could delegate, outsource, or just stop doing because it's not in your zone of genius. And free up that time to do more of what you're actually great at. Time to summarize so far. 5 lessons, 5 patterns I've noticed in my life. Lesson 1, ask for advice, but trust yourself. Lesson 2, figure out your superpower and your kryptonite. Lesson 3, when you have a big picture vision, work backwards with incremental steps. Lesson 4, when you don't have a vision, just take the next best step. Lesson 5, know what you're good at and build around it. Now, you might be thinking, Dr. Bobby, some of these lessons seem contradictory. Sometimes you plan, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have a goal, sometimes you just take the next step. But they're not contradictory. They're complementary. Whether I was choosing medicine over business or choosing both, whether I was pioneering a new PhD approach, whether I was training for my first Ironman or building a ranch I never planned to build or starting this podcast, I kept asking myself 2 questions. What am I actually good at? And what's the most efficient path from here to there? You don't need to have it all figured out. I certainly didn't. You don't need a master plan for the next 30 years. I didn't have one. But you do need to know yourself. You need to trust your judgment. And you need to be willing to jump in with both feet when the right step reveals itself. So here's my final question for you. What's your superpower? And what's the next best step you could take this week? Thanks so much for listening to Live Long and Well with Dr. Bobby. If you like this episode, please provide a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen. If you want to continue this journey or want to receive my newsletter on practical and scientific ways to improve your health and longevity, please visit me at drbobbylivelongandwell.com. That's doctor as in DR, Bobby, livelongandwell.com.